You're going to lose more time having your car repaired than you are trying to build places. I've never had an issue with someone listening to me because I'm female. The biggest problem I think that's out there is experience, because ultimately every single person has that driver's life in their hands.
But what we could do, Black, I'm loving your soundboard, mate.
I think there's a lot of really good work going on at the moment. Lewis Hamilton is doing some fantastic work. It's just something about endurance and LMPs that prototypes are my baby, and I just really want to go and work with them. I think they're fantastic little cars. It's hard, and embrace that. If you need to cry about it, cry about it. 1,000 times yes.
Hello and welcome to another legendary episode of the Stripping the Dipping podcast. You're joined by usual co-host, the dynamic duo of AMG Denz and the fabulous F1 Black, if I do say so myself. Hold up. And before I go into a rhyming song, we've got a very cool and very inspiring guest on today. It's not very often that we get aspiring motorsport and data engineer that's also been through the process of being a student and living that uni life. But they've got a wealth of work experience and a drive to thrive. Get it? I hope that drive to survive don't sue me. Please don't sue me, drive to survive. But without further ado, we have a really amazing guest, and she goes by the name of Lucy O'Connor. Lucy, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, we're very well. We're so excited to have you on. And just kind of touching into the intro we did as well, like an aspiring motorsport and data engineer, obviously, as well. You've gone through the kind of the kind of academic route that most engineers have made to do these days. But what we always like to do when we're starting these podcasts off with a new guest joining our Strip the Dip family is just to kind of find out more about you and kind of like your earliest motorsport memories. Do you have any family members that are either into mechanical or engineering backgrounds? And, growing up, who is your motorsport idol that you followed or looked up to as a kid?
So, in terms of my earliest motorsport memory, that has to be being like 4 or 5, sitting on my granddad's living room floor watching BSB. Or I think it was on like ITV or something at the time. I'm 23 now, so that was a bit of a while ago. That's kind of like my first motorsport introduction. Then it kind of dropped off for me a little bit, and I actually lost interest. I went through that typical teenage girl stage of One Direction and Justin Bieber and all that kind of thing. And then I just kind of slipped back into it, and now I'm very depressed if I don't have a race to watch. It's not a fun weekend if I don't have anything to watch. Um, then it's such a typical answer, but Ayrton Senna. I live and breathe everything Ayrton Senna. Not just him, but like his team around him. I think all of his engineers, all of his designers, all of his mechanics, they're just incredible. Some of the motorsport advances they made on those cars are just unreal, and his talent alone, if he hadn't tragically have passed away when he did, I think he'd have been an absolute force to be reckoned with in terms of records and statistics now.
Absolutely, there, Lucy. And Black, I think Lucy's gonna go down as a really popular guest, man, because she's given the answer that like all of our fans would say, in terms of again having that connection kind of with Ayrton Senna as well. I think this week actually makes it 30 years to around the date or time where he did that amazing drive around Donington Park in the wet. I'm sure you remember, Black, as a young dinosaur yourself may have existed one time to watch live. But just like you mentioned as well, Lucy, just Senna was a force to reckon with. And then you talked about the team there as well. you had the likes of Ron Dennis, the team principal, which was a really shrewd operator. Of course, as well, you've had really advanced mechanics and engineers there as well, like John Bernard, which would have helped with the development of the MP4-4, which is one of the most beautiful and most technologically advanced cars of its time as well. So definitely a big shout there. And I think what you said kind of echoes a lot of us in the UK in terms of you have parents that maybe watch a sport. You mentioned BSB, the British Superbike Series, and then maybe as you grow older, you kind of find other habits that you do, or like different hobbies to follow with friends. And then as you kind of like come full circle in it, you almost end up kind of going back to the place you once first started, which I think is kind of where a lot of us were, especially with me in sim racing. Like I started off with it as a kid. As I got older, I picked up guitar, and then now I've kind of come back full circle with it again, much to my girlfriend's dismay. So I could definitely relate. But yeah, I mean, moving into the second question before I bring Blag into it too. I wasn't quite sure if you were still currently studying or if you'd actually already graduated, but just kind of to give our viewers some information about you too. So you're studying towards a bachelor's of science in motorsport engineering, if I'm correct. Can you just
Mhm.
tell like our listeners about this your uni experience? What are some of your favorite modules, and how was some of like the practical stuff you've done, like influenced or kind of resulted in the stuff that you've gone on to do in terms of the work experience?
So I'm actually in quite a unique study situation. So I went to university at 21, which is quite late compared to a lot of people in the UK. After I've got a background career in retail and hospitality management.
Mhm.
So I joined uni at 21 through originally the Open University just to do a generic engineering degree. And then I can't even remember how I got in contact with someone, but with a tutor from the National Motorsport Academy.
Wow.
Um, they kind of got in touch with me and we transferred over and I studied through them. So I actually study full time, work full time as an insurance team manager, and I race pretty much full time as well. Um, so I don't have a life. It's very busy, but it's been incredible. There's some amazing people on my degree. Adam, I think his surname's Woots, is one of Max Verstappen's mechanics, and he's actually doing the same degree as me.
Wow.
Um, so there is an absolute broad of knowledge across the degree that I do. It specialises in people that work in the industry or people who can't go to a traditional uni, which when you're 21, you've got a mortgage and you're kind of dealing with that side of things. I can't really drop a job to go and study full time.
Mhm.
Um, it's brought some incredible experiences. I've spent some time with Mercedes, with their esports and with their simulation engineers. I've spent some time with Red Bull. I've spent time in single seaters with Wesley Racing and touring cars. I've got contacts all across the network, and I wouldn't have got those contacts if it wasn't for my degree. And I don't think I'd be where I was if I wasn't doing the degree that.
Wow, that's really interesting to hear, Lucy. And I think, again, like what a lot of our listeners can take in from that as well is that, it's never too late. And of course, like you mentioned, you started your university kind of like phase, maybe in an unorthodox kind of sense to how people usually do when they finish sixth form, etc., etc. But even then, with the right mentality, which you've applied yourself to it and it's opened up a wealth of different opportunities, which I think a lot of people sometimes forget or sometimes they're not aware that even exist. So I think that's really reassuring, like, crumb of comfort to a lot of our listeners that are still young and still like unsure of what they want to really get into. And before I hand it over to Blag as well, like it's really fascinating to hear. So yeah, Blag, I'll hand over the next series of questions to you.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me at home. Good to speak, Lucy, and it's really fascinating to hear your story. Like before we dive into the proper questions, like I've got a full-time job. I've also got a mortgage. I struggle to think about taking on like an extra hobby, let alone doing a degree. What was the thing that kind of gave you that decision to go, do you know what, I'm going to dive in and do this? So look, Lucy, full credit to you for taking a decision a little later, although, 21 or 23 is not old, but a little later to go into university, with a full-time job and commitments like a mortgage, like adding anything to your plate feels like a big deal. Feels like how you're going to have time to sleep, or eat or whatever. So, we all love motorsport, but what gave you that extra impetus to go, I'm going to do this degree? What made you dive in?
It was actually, and this sounds really soppy, my partner. He also worked in retail. He left and he got his dream job in the police force. So I was like, well, if he can do it at 27, why can't I do it at 21? And I went, I can manage it. It will be doable. If it's not, it's 4 years. I've got to get through 4 years and then that's it. That's my future set. And once I've set my mind to something, I'm very difficult to persuade away from it. So once I'd kind of sat there and gone, I'm going to go and do this degree, that's it. I was going to go and do a degree, whether it killed me or not.
Well, that's the determination that we hear a lot of the people that we're interviewing on this show. So join the club, and congrats. So what's your long-term goal? When you grow up in the motorsport world or the engineering world, what do you want to be?
I have a few kind of different aims. My realistic goal, I want to go and work in WEC. I love Formula One. I'm the kind of person that will get up at 3:30 on a morning to watch the Australian Grand Prix. Like, I adore it. But there's just something about endurance and LMPs that prototypes are my baby, and I just really want to go and work with them. I think they're fantastic little cars. My kind of dream goal is to set up a student-based racing team. So I'm very, very lucky to have the experience I've got through the people I've met. And I want to pass that on. So I want to start building a company who specializes in student teams. So whether we start in Caterhams or Clios or however we do it, and there's a set of, so you've got a number one mechanic, a number two mechanic, an engineer, me, a driver, and then everybody else in my team is a student, whether they're in year 9 and they want some work experience for Easter, or they're in the final year of university and they want to get their foot in the door, and then build it from there. So I eventually want to have a Formula 3, Formula 2 student team and take them around the world and give them those experiences that are incredibly difficult to come by. And then my dream goal, which is pushing it, I want to be the first female team principal to win a driver and a world championship in Formula One.
Just the 3 dreams, not
Just
being too
the
greedy.
3.
Yeah, simple. All right. Well, good luck. Good luck with all of those. I mean, they're all quite different. And jokes aside, because I think you've just found a way to really maximize the cost cap. If you do any of those dreams, I'm sure they'll be particularly rewarding. What is it about? Like, let's pick the student one, and Denz can dig into the prototypes and the WEC. But on that student team, I sense there's something about wanting to give back. Like, what is it that motivates you for that dream of giving those students the opportunity?
So anyone who's tried to get a response in motorsport will understand my frustration with motorsport communication. It doesn't exist. Trying to get just a simple one-word answer out of people sometimes is a nightmare. And those student opportunities, unless you know the right people or are on perfect schools in the perfect degree, they don't happen. And I think there's so much push around diversity and inclusion in motorsport at the moment, but I think students are kind of being forgotten about a little bit. Younger students, I think they've got so much support, which is fantastic. You've got the Alpine Year 9 females group that's just going on at the moment. You've got the FIA Girls on Track. You've got F1 in schools. When you get to sixth form, you can get the sixth form work experience over the summer. And when you're in kind of final years of uni, you can get somewhere. But I'm in this kind of little group that I don't really fit in with the younger people, but I'm also not like on if too like late on enough in my degree to fit in with the other end of people. And I've struggled so much to get that experience to start with. And I know so many other people who are the same, that it's not fair. Everybody should have access to that kind of experience, because how do you get people into a field without them knowing if that field's for them? And how do you know a field's for you unless you've tried it?
It's a fair question, and do you know what? I think with motorsport, something in my head goes, "Oh well, that's an elite kind of environment or elitist environment." So I kind of let it off the hook a bit, like, "Oh yeah, of course, it's who you know." But you're right, in terms of fairness and actually finding that sort of untapped talent, something could be done there. So that sounds extremely fascinating. So let's do a bit of a short question, and then I'll hand back to Denz. So let's imagine you get dream number 3, right? So you're going to win that world championship. You're going to be the engineer on the drivers' world champion as well. Pick an F1 team that you'd like to do it with. Who would you
McLaren.
pick? Aha.
McLaren.
And why? You came straight in on that. Why McLaren?
I am a McLaren girl through and through. I admit we have a bit of a box this year, but cut me open, I blame papaya. That is kind of, it's just, they have this vibe, and I just associate so well with everything they stand for.
Oh, wow. Well, and any particular driver, if you were to win that drivers' championship, anyone on the current grid or coming up that you particularly admire?
Oh, if I could bring Danny Rick back, I'd bring Danny Rick back.
Oh, there's pain in that voice. Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame. Well, listen, tell me, you're an engineer. That means you're smart. That means you can kind of watch racing and like see things that I don't. What was it you think that held Danny Rick back from really succeeding at McLaren?
There was a really interesting comment made by Christian Horner when he came back over, that they've had to completely reteach Danny how to drive a car. Danny has got such a specific style of driving that if a car's not suited to that style of driving, it ain't going to work. And I just don't think those cars worked.
That's interesting.
They simply weren't built for him.
Yeah. And I wonder because if you're Lando Norris, right, you probably work that out because you're watching what you're doing and you're watching what your teammate does, and probably more than most, exactly what you're doing, and so you could probably work out what your teammate needs. I wonder if you're the incumbent in a team, if you'll ever let your team start to drift the design towards your teammate. Probably never. I don't know. But that's interesting. Okay, well. Danny Rick and the McLaren. One day, we hope that's a match made in heaven with you, Lucy, as the engineer. Denz, passing it back over to you for the next round of questions.
Hey, thank you there, Blag. And yeah, great answer there as well, Lucy. There are a lot of Danny Rick fans, including my girlfriend, unfortunately. But yeah, just a really good insight there as well. The points you made about, the students being underrepresented in relation to the world of motorsport, I think is a very big kind of red flag that I think people need to pick up on as well and smell the coffee on, because it's something which I feel definitely gets overlooked. And yeah, as well as you mentioning working with McLaren and doing that as well would be incredible, because I mean, in terms of McLaren, it's almost it's over a decade since they won the drivers with Lewis, and then obviously the success they had as well during the David Coulthard and Mick Hakkinen era too in the early 2000s. And just the heritage of McLaren too, I mean, you've got big manufacturers in Formula One, such as Mercedes and obviously Honda, which have backed Red Bull and so forth and so on, like Ferrari. But McLaren is just one of those like feel-good stories, a bit like Williams too, where, it's like Bruce McLaren, just like a driver and somebody that wants to build their own team. And then like look at the legacy and dynasty he's built with McLaren and the branding and the drivers and the success that's come over the years as well, when you mentioned and Senna. So definitely took me down memory lane there. But before we change up the subject a bit there, Lucy, I just wanted to ask as well, you mentioned obviously WEC, the World Endurance Championship. If you had to pick like a different team or manufacturer to work with in prototypes, who would you want to work with? Because, and I also wanted to get your thoughts as well as just like the the new like world endurance cars in terms of the LMP class with the new Ferrari hypercar, the Porsche hypercar. We're seeing a bit of a crossover with that as well in terms of INSA with the GTP series. There's a V8 Cadillac with a hybrid as well and a BMW as well. It's such an exciting time in just prototype racing, isn't it?
It's incredible. So I've just come off the back of a season with Praga. So I've just come off doing a season with them, and to see such a small unknown Czech car manufacturer grow to the size that they've grown in the space of 2 seasons is unreal. And you can see that now slowly feeding through the entirety of prototypes, like you say, with the LMPHs. Ferrari coming into it, Lamborghini coming into it, you've got Beamer coming into it. I'm lucky enough to be going to Le Mans this year, and to say I'm excited is an absolute understatement. To see all of these cars in one place, if I don't cry, it's going to be a miracle.
I could imagine, Lucy. And I get, so you got an invite to Le Mans and you didn't think to invite us. I see how it is, Lucy.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's okay. But no, it's like you got my notes in front of me, Lucy, because to be fair, I thought that was going to be a great segue onto my next question, which is about the Praga. And actually, let me set the scene a bit for our listeners, because not all of them are so versed in like endurance or multi-class racing. But of course, Praga, again, great manufacturer, like you said as well. They've designed the Praga R1, which is, how can I describe it? It's like I wouldn't say a baby. I would say it's like a condensed version of an LMP2 car, but it has immense amounts of downforce, and also it's quite lightweight. So they are quite nippy cars and are well known, to give a GT3 car a run for its money around a track like Oulton Park or Donington Park or Silverstone, for example. So, there's the Brit Car Endurance Championship, which I kind of have vague knowledge of because of Jimmy Broadbent from the sim kind of world. But to bring it back to you, Lucy, you actually did a stint as a trainee data engineer with VR Motorsport. So kind of question on that one is just like, how valuable were the things that you learned from the experience? And also, how did you go about gaining this opportunity? Because I feel that would be really essential for our listeners to find out about as well.
So kind of starting at like the start of my Praga journey, so there was another team, not last season, the season before, who I went, I'm just going to email them. Why not? And it was literally off the back of an email. I just went, hi, I'm a student. I want to come and see what you do. Will you have me? And they went, yeah, come along to Silverstone and come and see what we do. So I went along to the Silverstone 2-hour special like endurance one they did that year, and fell in love. I've loved those cars for a long time, but seeing them in person is unreal. They weren't able to take anyone on at the time, so they said, here, get in touch with Vince. So I did. I spent the rest of the season training with them, and then I got a full-time position with them for the season just gone. And it's just, they're my absolute favourite little cars. They're like the perfect little cross between a single-seater and a GT car. So we've had people come from GT racing, we've had people from single-seater racing who've come in and they've both loved it, because it's such a great little, either to go from one to the other or to go from one to prototypes. It's fun. We've had Tommy Foster, who's quite well known in like the LMP side of things. He's driven them, but then we've also had the likes of, you mentioned Jimmy Broadbent, who's kind of come in and never really raced a car of that caliber, and between him and Gordy, absolutely wiped the floor with everybody. It's a fantastic little thing.
Absolutely, and like you mentioned as well, Lucy, like that kind of like Praga kind of program, and also just the Brit Car series as well. It seems to kind of culminate that kind of like wealth of experience from the kind of more veteran drivers, like you mentioned, but also kind of like the younger drivers or the drivers that come from very unconventional backgrounds that maybe haven't even driven a race car, coming into that as well and applying themselves. And it doesn't really matter kind of who has more experience or who doesn't. it almost just comes down to the kind of drive, the preparation, the talks with the engineers and the team to kind of make sure that you extract the best performance, and over the course of the championship, you perform. So it's a really great series, and one that I'd implore our listeners to definitely check out too. But also, just another thing you mentioned as well, Lucy, is just like the very natural way the opportunity came about as well, and handing it kind of back to you, like, how important is it to just have patience and have dedication and to be resilient and to also sometimes handle rejection? Because there's a lot of students out there that they say, I want to be the team principal of Red Bull one day, and then they might put in a letter into Red Bull and they might not get a response, and that, like, lack of a response could completely break their heart, when actually it's just a bit more, having a little bit more patience, like take that said in the song, shout out to Gary Barlow. But how important is it to have those kind of like moments of this faith in the process, and how do you go about dealing with rejection and being resilient in those situations?
It's hard. It is. Everybody that works in motorsport struggles with rejection. It is so unbelievably difficult, and it happens at every single level, whether you're an entry level student to someone that's working in F1. It happens all the time, and I don't want to say it's part and parcel of the industry, but it is. It's I've been in conversations with people trying to arrange phone calls to arrange contracts, and then I've just been ghosted, and I've never heard back. And it is beyond frustrating, because you sat there like, well, can you not just send me one word, just yes or no? That's all I'm asking. I don't want war and peace. You just kind of have to think of it, it's one no closer to a yes. And I know that sounds so difficult, and it is hard, and embrace that. If you need to cry about it, cry about it. I've cried about it. I've seen grown men cry about rejections. It happens. Embrace that and go, right, okay, moving on, next one, done. And that's kind of just how you've got to be, and you'll build that thicker skin the more and more you do it. And I think what's really important is having that support network, meet other engineers, get to know other students. And I tell you now, every single one of them has been through the exact same thing you are going through right now. And they will go through that with you. And sometimes you just need that friend to go, oh, they didn't get back to me again. And they'll go, I know, right? That's just sometimes what you need.
Thank you for that, Lucy, because again, I think that is a really pertinent thing as well, that I don't think enough people talk about. And key things you mentioned there as well, having a support network, key things you mentioned there as well, like being able to bounce back from it and not always see rejection sometimes as just like not being good enough, but sometimes actually it being like a stroke of luck. Because I've given the story to our listeners many times, but in a very condensed version there, Lucy, even when I was at university doing like my law degree, I was trying to get in at different firms, and they were like, well, it's all great, Denz, we love your enthusiasm, but we're kind of looking for somebody more experienced. I was like, wait, how do you get experience from a place that won't give you experience? So, strange one, that. And it took me in the direction, Lucy, of working in a Mercedes dealership as a receptionist, and then working my way up through that network to then meet a solicitor that then would give me the opportunity to do some work experience at their firm across the road. So, like you said, like sometimes a no isn't always a no, and sometimes it just builds your resilience and builds your kind of like skin to adversity and challenges and things not always going your way, which I think is motorsports. You could have the best car, the best driver, and sometimes we see in F1 or other sports the combination still wasn't good enough because there's one chink in the chain that went wrong, and regardless of the car, whether the driver or even the strategy, it couldn't be saved. So I think really key point there, and I'm glad you said that too. So what we'll do as well, Lucy, we'll kind of talk a bit more specifically, because we've got a couple of tech heads as well that love tech and love strategy. So of course we'd be remiss if we didn't go in a bit more detail with your VR motorsports experience too. You headed the ECU monitoring aspect of things. You also did static pit stop calculations and fuel usage. You also did like driver coaching, which again is really important, using the data and telemetry from the cars and the black box and stuff like that too. just wanted you to talk to our listeners more about that as well in terms of the roles. And like also to add on to that, just how easy is it to coach and work with different personalities and drivers depending on their backgrounds, their egos, and whether or not they're a driver that just lacks confidence maybe in a particular car or setup?
It is so in the driver aspect, you have to get to know your driver. Some are like really out there and really confident, and Gordy Much, for example, from the Pragas, he is a very capable guy and needs very little support. He knows exactly what he's doing. He'll come in, he'll tell you what's wrong with his car, you'll fix it, off he goes. There's others that need that little bit more kind of bringing out of the shell, especially people who are new to the sport, and it's just kind of feeling their energy and feeding it back. That sounds so stereotypical, but it really is. You've got to read that person, see what they're giving you and give the same back, but step it up a little bit. And it is so like being a parent. I can't describe enough how like it is being a parent. You've got one of my absolute best friends, Richard Morris. I love the boy to pieces, but we went to Zandvoort last year to race in his Revolutions, and I spent more time shouting at him, telling him to stay on task, than I did actually coaching him, because they've got so much going on in their brain and so much they're trying to think about, their media, um, their guests, their YouTube stuff that they've got to do. They've got to go and fix this car. They've got to go and speak to that sponsor. They've got to go and eat at some point during the day, poor things. And it's your kind of job to keep them when they need to be at that moment. In terms of technical role, which one do you want to know about? I've done so many different things that I could be here for hours.
No, for sure, Lucy. And I think kind of the one which was interesting we talked about off air was just like, before you even embarked on the motorsports journey, like you're quite keen in maths, which I can't lie, maths actually scares me. I only like maths when I'm looking at the money in my bank account. And most times that's before I spend it all on Uber Eats or sim racing equipment. So forgive me, Lucy. But yeah, like maybe some of like the pit stop stuff in terms of calculating strategies, as well as that as well. You mentioned kind of monitoring the ICE, so the internal combustion unit, just what that involves. Because again, like, we're here Formula One drivers talking about a strap mode or, default, engine mode 7 and then put it in chassis mode 6. Like, how does that also come about? And in terms of the information you'll see on the telemetry and then kind of putting that into useful information that goes on the pit wall or to the driver?
So with the pit stop times and everything, it's a lot easier than it almost comes across. So we had, again, going back to Pragas, we had between 4 and 6 cars depending on the race. You have to persuade your drivers during the test to come in and do a fake pit stop. So you'd say, right, I need you to do a race in, I need you to stop, and then I need you to do a race out. And you'd literally just time them from the minute they hit the bar, they stop, you stop the timer, right, that's my in time. As soon as the mechanic's hand touches the car and they start pushing back, right, start the timer again, cross the beam, that's my out time. And you literally just take an average. And it's okay, the average is 1 minute 30 for beam to beam. So join in, stop in, leaving. The whole thing's 1 minute 30. That means if I've got a mandatory pit stop time of 2 minutes, they need to be static for 30 seconds. Okay, I know they're always going to stall the car because they're new and they're learning. So I'm going to cut theirs by 5 seconds. Static time's going to be 20 because, 25. Because I know they're going to stall it and we're going to need to bump start them. So there's no point in adding extra time onto the pit stop. But I know they're really quick when they come in because they really like the throttle and they forget what a pit limiter is. So I'm going to put an extra 10 seconds onto there because I know they're going to kick it out the other end way faster than anybody else. So you kind of get the average and then have to learn your drivers a little bit and kind of say, okay, you need a bit more time, you need less time. And then you've got to take into account.
What we could do. Black, I'm loving your soundboard, mate.
Sorry.
You just had to. You just had to. Okay. So we're back with the Stripping the Dipping podcast after a seamless break and edit. And yeah, Lucy, we've talked about a lot of things already. So, a couple of your work experience opportunities as well, which was grand, kind of your motivations as well in studying, uni life as such as well, your motivations, which, could inspire a whole generation as such. Before I hand it back to Sir Black, just we often talk about, the relevant skills or relevant experiences when it comes to being in such an amazing industry and getting the opportunities. But I think what gets overlooked a lot is, the importance of the softer skills. And I think with you already mentioned that you had the experience of working in retail and having a retail life even before, transitioning over to the world of motorsport. How would you say that the soft skills you gain from working in retail transfer over to your work in the motorsport side of things in terms of communication, dealing with high pressure situations, and being able to report to more senior people within the team?
It's indescribable how much those skills matter, because some of them really don't exist in the industry. I think people who have kind of grown up in the motorsport world, it's a very unique environment, and I think if you've never been in it, it's hard to describe. It's like its own little bubble, and that communication is so important, because the way I talk to my peer engineers, the way I talk to a student engineer, and the way I talk to a senior engineer are three very different things.
Right, Black, I'll transition to you, my friend.
The only tag you're going to give me. Okay, well, I'm here,
Vintage dinosaur.
So here's a question. Here's a question. I'm a young dinosaur. So, Lucy, let's tap into your engineering skills, those soft skills, right? I've got a friend, right? He's a sim racer. Let's call him Dennis. He enters like endurance sim races, 12-hour, did 3-hour of the weekend, but like the longer ones, he's really struggling to kind of keep the car intact, in the early hours of the race. So I don't know, what advice would you give to my friend Dennis, in that regard as an engineer?
Well, Dennis, to finish a race first you must finish. Don't bin it in corner one. It is better to stay out of the way and avoid the trouble and gain those places back than it is to try and floor it round and stick it in the wall. You're going to lose more time having your car repaired than you are trying to build places. And if you can't identify why it is you're losing the car, go and find an engineer. You'll be surprised how many engineers out there actually sim engineer. I do it myself. I work with sim drivers all the time. It's quite difficult without kind of seeing his trace lines and stuff to identify what it is. It could be his brake bias is wrong for the car. It could be his throttle pattern's not right, his brake pattern's not right. He might be braking too hard, he might not be braking enough. It might be braking too hard where he needs to brake less and less where he needs to brake more. Every driver's challenges are kind of unique. But it's kind of like a generic overlook, I would say. Stay out the way, let everybody else crash in front of you, and stay safe.
So I just hope my good friend Dennis was listening to that. That's really sound advice. And speaking of reliability, I think you were at Idola Motorsport as a reliability engineer. Can you tell us a bit about that experience? What would you say the highlight is? What do you do and what's it like?
The cars are my children. Essentially, my job was to make sure we were legal to race. So our boost was in parameters, we weren't over boosted and things like that. But also just to make sure that the cars would make it to the end of the race. And reliability engineer in the Praga paddock is probably one of the most difficult titles to have, because for those who have watched it, they'll know that they are very tricky little things, and it doesn't take much to upset them. They are very much moody teenagers, and it's just kind of spending a lot of time getting to know what it is that just tips them over the edge a little bit, what their favorite kind, it sounds ridiculous, but what their favorite kind of weather is, because weirdly a car of like that should thrive in certain conditions, and it actually thrived in conditions you didn't expect it to, and you're sat there going, what are you doing? Well, okay, this is what we're working with, I suppose. And it's okay, this is this car's little, everyone's got their kind of like little neat thing about them that's their thing, and the Pragas have their own as well.
That there's almost like not quite a human quality, but like there's so many different variables that in the end it ends up taking like a slightly subjective approach to work out how to keep a car running and what conditions to keep it in. That's really fascinating. And what would you say the hardest thing is in that regard, looking after the reliability? What have you found personally most challenging?
Actually, that's a really good question. I think for me, sometimes it's getting people to listen to you. Because you can see what I can see in the numbers is what I can see in the numbers. Numbers don't lie unless I want them to. But numbers normally they don't lie. So if my number is telling me that we're over boosting, I don't care that you can't find anything, Mr. Mechanic. There is something wrong with that car because it's over boosting. You need to strip that exhaust down and check the wastegate. Have you checked that your exhaust isn't cracked? Have you checked my sensor to make sure my sensor's attached? Because I don't have the tools to get my hand in there, but you do. So if you could just go ahead and check that as well. So sometimes it's getting people to listen to you because it's rare, but it happens. They look at you when you're just the face behind a screen. You're not, because you're not on the car all the time. You kind of get left to the back a little bit. And sometimes it can be difficult to get your message across when you really need it to.
Oh, that's really interesting. Do you think there's a kind of, I don't know, a rivalry or a slight division between mechanics and engineers, or like, am I just reading into it? Like, where would you see the divisions in a team, perhaps, where that communication is most difficult?
I think there is a little bit, because I think, again, in the world of motorsport, you have to be competitive to survive. And that's not just in terms of drivers, that's in terms of everybody. Mechanics, engineers, anyone that works in motorsport was some of the most competitive people you've ever met. Even people like yourselves who work in the media side of things, you've got to be competitive to thrive. And I think it's natural, you're always going to have that little bit of friction between everybody, but especially between mechanics and engineers, because mechanics don't like being told what to do. And there's going to be some mechanics sat there out there going, no, we don't mind. You do. You hate being told what to do. Especially from an engineer, because we'll tell you what we want, but we won't tell you how we want you to do it. We'll just go, you need more downforce, but I ain't going to tell you how to give more downforce. Just give me more downforce. And that's where we fall down a little bit as engineers. We need to be kind of more specific with what we want, I think, a lot of the time. So I think there's something there. I think it varies in level depending on what team you're in, but there's always going to be a little bit.
No, of course. And do you think there's perhaps a gender angle here, or not at all? Like, I know you only experience your own life, right? So you can't tell what it's, I guess, like to be a male engineer talking to a mechanic in the pit lane. But do you think there's an element of gender there, or not really?
No, not in this. There is, don't get me wrong, there's a gender gap in motorsport, but it's not something that I've put. There probably are people out there who have experienced that, but personally, I've not. I've never had an issue with someone listening to me because I'm female. The biggest problem I think that's out there is experience, because ultimately every single person has that driver's life in their hands. And are you really going to straight out trust someone who's only been doing this 6 months? You're going to question them a little bit naturally, and that's perfectly okay. It's just that communication then about how we get around that kind of barrier.
Interesting. You're absolutely right that, as you say, the decisions you make and that mechanics then implement can have a bearing on life or death or injury. So there has to be that trust and It's a really fascinating angle that I don't think we've heard anyone else mention actually over the episodes of the show. So here's a quick question before we sort of segue and I hand back to Denz. Just on that experience, is there something you need to do when you're sort of early in your career to demonstrate credibility early when you join a team or when you engage someone in a team for the first time? Is there something that you're thinking, right, I need to show them that I mean business, that I'm serious, or are you more natural? So what are you thinking about there?
I think coming from my background, I'm a very natural person. I don't see the point in faking it. Be polite, be respectful. That goes a long way. And just being very clear with what you say and why you're saying it. I am a baby in the sport compared to so many people. I've had the pleasure of working with some very experienced, very talented engineers, and it's just you have to get your point across in a polite but assertive manner. So this is what I'm saying and this is why I'm saying it, but I'm not trying to be a twat about it.
We could start a 2023 sort of secular Bible. That could be the opening line. But I'm not trying to be a twat about it. That sounds like a good advice for most people. Let me hand back in the least twattish way to our good friend Denz. Denz, over to you for the last couple of questions.
I see. So you're trying to have a go at my sim racing alter ego, Dennis. Oh, okay, Black. I see how it is. When I cook your boy, what's his name? Oh, young Alexander Rossi. When the original Rossi is Valentino Rossi. Then we'll see happier days. But no, hi Lucy. It's glad to be back after Black outed my life. And if you haven't realized already, me and Black have this thing where we just trade punches with each other as friendly banter and friendly nudges as rival IndyCar fans within McLaren. Ironically enough, both of us support McLaren drivers in the IndyCar program, but he's a Rossi boy and I'm a Pato Sauce kind of guy because Pato Sauce is the man of the future. But anyway, Lucy, thank you. Let's get into actually more pressing kind of topic, and actually Blag alluded to it, and I think you gave your honest answer, that also when you're in the kind of position you are at the moment, people tend to overlook you maybe just because of your kind of experience, I guess, in the field, and sometimes you have to be really assertive with putting things across. But also, I guess what we've seen over the years as well is the rise of women in motorsport, and it's a trend that I think still has a long way to go. And I still think that a lot of spotlight and representation needs to be shone on it. But in terms of talking about female mechanical engineers or data engineers, we've got the likes of Hannah Smits, the Red Bull lead head engineer. We've had Bernie Collins, which is now on Sky F1, but again, ex Aston Martin race strategist. Ruth Bothcon as well from Ferrari, Haas, and Alfa Romeo. So she really was part of that Ferrari group. And then as well, Stephanie Travers, which was part of Mercedes AMG's F1 team too, more on the Petronas side. But from your perspective, Lucy, how important is it to have these strong, successful women in positions of power within motorsport?
It's so important. Why would you want to go into a sport if you've got no one to look up to? Every child, you ask every child, who did you look up to as a kid? And there will be someone in a position of what they wanted to do that was the reason they went into what they did. So when I was younger, earlier I said I wanted to be a maths teacher before I got into motorsport. The person I looked up to when I was a kid was my teacher, Miss Owens. And I thought she was the kindest, the cleverest person. And she was the reason that I wanted to teach. Admittedly, I decided it wasn't a career for me, but she's the reason I did that. My mum is in her late 40s now, and she's actually just coming to the end of her degree as a lawyer. And she's only started that within the last decade. And she looks up to so many women in law that she wouldn't be doing that if it wasn't for them. So whether it's the Ella, I can't remember her surname, Ella Podmore, in McLaren. She's won Women Engineer of the Year. She's now got, I think it's an MBE or an OBE. She's just been awarded. She's incredible. There's so many women out there like her. Charlotte Phelps, who has worked in W Series, GT. I was lucky enough to work with her in Praga. She is an incredible woman who has built an incredible self business, all while being a racing driver as well. She's gone out and she's worked for Mercedes, and she's someone that I really look up to for someone that I want to be like. So I think it's important at every single level, whether it's karting, whether it's F1, whether it's WEC, whether it's rallying, whether it's V8s, bikes, whatever it is, everybody needs someone to aspire to.
Absolutely there, Lucy. And like you mentioned as well, I think it's incredibly important, like you said, to have those aspirations and to have like something to look up to. And, thankfully what we have now is, more people like you, Lucy, which are going to inspire the future generation, of young kids, young women as well, that want to work, in the very industrious and very, challenging and also at times hard, world, which is motor racing. So it's incredible that you've given us that insight and also just kind of the perspective how important it is. But also, I think again you just gave some incredible answers, because we've got a lot of tidbits that will ring out and I think will become kind of almost points of discussion for us to talk about on future episodes. But also you mentioned having that like ability of wanting to have a dream to give back to university kids and to kind of maybe even go into younger age groups and kind of like to teach them about the world of motor racing and to kind of give them that career path of how it can be done and how it can be made possible. But like, how would you feel that people from less represented backgrounds could get more opportunities in the world of motor racing, in terms of scholarships and maybe other programs?
I definitely think there needs to be more out there. I think there's a lot of really good work going on at the moment. Lewis Hamilton is doing some fantastic work with BAME groups for scholarships and things like that. You've got F1 Girls on Track, which to any young girl listening, I cannot recommend them enough. They are so supportive and such a lovely group of people that they're fantastic. F1 in schools, I think reaching out to children at such a young age and getting them involved early is so important, because making a career seem realistic to anybody and everybody is what gets people into that career. It's all of us when we were younger, we sat there and said, I want to be an F1 driver, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a ballet dancer, whatever it is you wanted to do. Why aren't they attainable? What is it that means people can't turn those dreams into what they want? And I think there needs to be more bridges for everybody, not just even specific groups. I think for everyone, there should be every opportunity out there that could possibly ever be created to give people that path, because simply, why the hell not?
And I think that's a fair and kind of a very relatable feeling as well for us all too, Lucy, because these are the questions we ask all the time. And, you look at Formula One and over the years, we've seen the landscape start to change. There's been a catalyst of things that have been done. You mentioned like Lewis Hamilton and his initiatives through the work that he does with schools, charities, different kind of academic organizations as well. Seb Vettel was also, I think a huge kind of mouthpiece as well for, the sport trying to educate itself on places where it was going wrong and, giving kind of like people and voices and things that wouldn't normally get the chance representation, an actual word, which is so key in like starting these conversations. So I'm really happy that we had this discussion as well in relation to it, and it's something that I really look forward to seeing changing. Like with my girlfriend, I'm always saying, it'd be so cool if like Little Hazel in the future, she's out on the circuit. And, we had Ben Collins, a correspondent from The Sun, talking about a local track being, I think in combination with F1, they want to collaborate with this football team. You might have heard of them actually. They bottle a lot of championships and trophies. But listen, I don't want to make Black cry too much, so I won't say what team. But you can guess which one it is, Lucy. There's like a program there with an F1 team and a football team in North London, and essentially they might open up a go-karting circuit, which could be, you know, the next like hotspot for, you know, a future talent, you know, a next female driver making it into Formula One, a next female engineer getting a taste of what karting's like, and then going down the route that you've gone through with your kind of degree as well. So it's uber important. And as a young person, we see some stuff in the world and we're like, wow, this generation's lost in sauce. But then other times, you know, you've got brilliant people like yourself. You're doing really, you know, exceptional stuff. And actually you're setting the trend and the mold for the people of the future. So I think you also need to give yourself a pat on the back, you know, and you know, take credit for the stuff as well.
Thank you. That was really nice of you to say. Aww.
No worries at all, Lucy. Well, before we wrap today's episode up, because we covered a lot, and I feel we definitely need you back on, Lucy. We'll have to have you in an interactive episode where we can get some more fan questions in, and we'll do some would you rathers and throw some you know, wild and wacky hypotheticals at you. But you know, before we close,
absolutely.
yeah, well, that would be amazing. We'll make sure we do it, you know, at some point of this season as well. But before we wrap this one up, just Lucy, let us know kind of like where can our listeners find you first of all to, you know, follow your journey, to kind of get inspiration from you if they need also like, you know, just some steering in the right kind of direction with their kind of like junior careers at this stage. And what are you looking forward to for the rest of the year? Because I'm conscious we're already in April, so geez, it's already quarter of the year, but you know, there's already so much that could happen, or a third of the year. So yeah, just you know, please let us know where we can find you. If there's any other interesting projects or stuff that we can know about, you know, for the imminent future.
So I'm on LinkedIn. So anyone is more than welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. It's Eve Cassie, but it's spelt the Irish way, so it's probably something easier to put in a description. Again, I try to document as much of my racing as I can on there. Again, anyone is more than welcome to reach out to me. If you're really little and you happen to be listening and you don't have social media, if you want to get your parents in touch with me and you want my email address, I'm more than happy to have those conversations with people and start building those links and get people into the right networks. Because if you want to go out and get into motorsport, don't listen to anybody, go out and get into motorsport. It's a fantastic little community and I can't recommend the Little Family enough. For me personally, I'm currently looking at going and racing some historic LMP2s. That's my exciting little project for the year. I've got some very nice little Group C's that currently being converted, and then we're going to go and have a little dabble with those. They're kind of my biggest car to date, so that's going to be a little bit of nice.
Please tell me as well, Lucy, that you have a YouTube channel, firstly of all, and secondly of all, you're going to document this experience, and we might get a YouTube video. Please.
I don't have a YouTube actually. I've always thought people weren't actually interested. So I've always kind of said it's not worth it. I want to watch it, but maybe it's something I start in the future, especially with Goodwood and Le Mans this year. So yeah, I'm also at Goodwood and Le Mans. So if anyone is there, I will have my Vamp Engineering, which is my engineering company. I'll have my jacket on, so if you spot me, come and say hello, come and have a chat. If you want to come and ask me for some advice, go for it. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Yeah, there's some exciting little things going on this year.
It really is, Lucy. As soon as you mentioned Group C and like, you know, the old school Le Mans cars, I just imagine the Mazda 787B just like flying through with its rotary engine. So yeah, you've got me definitely ticked for that whenever you do decide to do YouTube channel, and of course bring those experiences to us. But yeah, before we wrap up, Blag, was there anything you wanted to say or add in as well?
Super quickly, there's a question we always ask every guest, right? One, but we're going to go for it, right? So the first question, which links into it, and please give us the right answer. I mean, I presume that you enjoy the occasional pizza, right?
I've actually just had pizza for my dinner, so of course.
Right, exactly. Spot on, right? I've got a couple in the fridge, we're all getting there, right? Okay, so there's a yes or no question that is basically dividing the world 58, 42. No, that's not even right, is it? 48, 52. There we go. My maths is not at your level. So here's the question. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Yes, 1,000 times yes.
That was an emphatic yes. That sounds like the pizza you just had pineapple on it, to be honest.
It may have done.
Well, there we are. Look, one more for the Pineapple Club. Georgie is going to be extremely happy. Guys, if you've made it this far into the episode, then you definitely owe us a review and a rating, a subscribe, a like, a follow, whatever platform you're listening to us on right now. Please click away and let other people know that we're here. Give us a share. Denz, you know that you love closing out episodes, so why don't I hand over to you?
Oh, why, thank you there, my vintage dinosaur friend Blag. That was very kind of you. But yes, myself, AMG Denz, and my alter ego Dennis, apparently, will be living life. And whilst we do live a great sim racing life, I also want to thank our very special guest today, Lucy, for joining us. Because, insight into the world of motorsport and getting into it from the academic level is really interesting and fascinating for a lot of us to follow. And just your knowledge, just also your experiences, the kind of topics that you've discussed today as well, I think will resonate with all of our listeners, whether it's the more kind of veteran ones, the ones that are still kind of going through uni, the ones that are still in school. There was something in this episode that had some significance, or a crumb or a nugget, that everybody could go away and have, in a happy meal. Big shout out to McDonald's. And if you're ever listening to this McDonald's, you can pay me a bag. Thank you. But anyway, Lucy, thank you so much just for your time today as well. Like I said, definitely need to get you back on for another episode this season. We'd really look forward to that. And yeah, any final words from you at all, Lucy, before we go?
Thank you, first of all. This is kind of the first podcast I've done, so it's been a nice experience. I loved it. But yeah, I think just if you're sat there listening and you think, I want to do what she's talking about, come and find me, come and have a chat. Let's get you doing what I'm doing, because I want to see so many more people in my world.
Oh, you see that right there, I think is going to put a smile on a lot of people's faces, Lucy. And again, thank you, for sharing your experiences with us as well. Also, your first podcast, geez, you're a natural at this. I won't be surprised if you got your own podcast in a couple of months' time, to be fair, because again, you're a complete natural at this, and just really great conversations as well. So I'm super thankful. And yeah, guys, listening to this podcast, make sure that you show it some support. Make sure as well that you go and actually follow Lucy, and that you give us some support as well with her engineering and racing adventures as well. There's some really amazing stuff that I'm sure is going to come out of that. I'm sure Blag as well is actually going to Goodwood, so that could be a potential link for the future as well. So awesome stuff. And yeah, guys, please make sure that you go and show our guest Lucy Jane O'Connor some support from the Stripping the Dipping family ourselves. And yeah, it's been your smooth co-host, Mr. AMG Denz, aka the modern day Morgan Freeman. And of course, just F1 Blag number 2, since that's what his name's set up on the screen. But you guys can't see that because this is a visual podcast. Nonetheless, it's been your boy AMG Denz and Blag. Oh, he misses you. All right, cool. He's amateur. Anyway, it's been your boy AMG Denz, and yeah, we're out. Peace.